I would like to go back to King Arthur because there's a lot of things went wrong during that and a lot of things that were out of our control, and I just don't think we ended up matching the aspiration. We just didn't quite make the movie we wanted. And the idea was that in success we would have made several of those films.
Wow.
I'm captivated by the Arthurian legend, and I just felt like we really missed an opportunity to tell a long form story.
Guy Ritchie is one of my favorite directors. He knows how to make entertaining movies with funny characters, with some slick stylistic filmmaking techniques. Though some of his movies aren't as great as others, and some just make me scratch my head, I overall really enjoy his filmography, and recently he had 2 back-to-back bangers, and I'm just anxious waiting for his new film to release. But something I noticed that Guy Ritchie likes to do is to go back and give his own take on stories and characters that he enjoys. Stuff like Sherlock Holmes, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and the topic of today's video, King Arthur. This had the makings of being something truly great, and a chance to give a fresh take on the tale of King Arthur, Camelot, and the Knights of the Round Table. It had an accomplished director, a good cast, a sizable budget, and a recognizable classic story that most people have heard of. This would be a chance to bring the King Arthur legend back into pop culture relevance. It all looked like it was a perfect recipe for success, but due to several reasons, it flopped hard, receiving terrible reviews from critics and average to below average reviews from fans, as well as bombing at the box office. So, what happened? On paper, this had the makings of being a success. Well, it's a combination of behind the scenes issues with the studio, as well as general audiences at the time, and some issues with the film itself. And I decided that I want to go over these issues. I want to discuss what we heard about the behind the scenes stuff, talk about why it didn't resonate with general audiences, and then finally, talk about the final product that we did get. This video will contain spoilers, so you've been warned. Ready? Let's get into it. So there isn't much information about the behind the scenes issues that happened during production, although the star Charlie Hunnam has stated that the production was troubled and they weren't happy with the final product, and he has stated that he would like to go back and try it again. Though he didn't give specifics, here's what we can gather and piece together from various things he said in interviews. So it appears that the main issue that plagued this movie seems to be extensive rewrites and a conflict between Guy Ritchie and the studio about the final product. As stated by Hunnam, the original runtime was 3.5 hours long, although if we look at the final runtime, it clocks in at around 2 hours. That means that nearly an hour and a half of this movie was cut out, which means that there's large chunks of this movie that were rewritten, reshot, and re-edited. Apparently the first 30 to 40 minutes of the film got changed to just 10 minutes, and that Guy Ritchie was in the editing room working on trying to come up with new montages in order to condense and save time.
The work that he does happens in the editing room, where there's this grand reimagining, like that Jack's Eye scene that you were talking about wasn't in the original script. There was an effort to condense significantly the first 30 or 40 minutes of the film down to a 10-minute sequence, because his original cut came in at 3.5 hours and we had to trim it down. And so that was a scene that he designed to facilitate us going in and out and doing a shorthand of like 20 scenes that played out in a linear fashion that he wanted to condense down into one montage.
But to add to the troubles, there was a casting decision that ended up not working out, but the character was a central part of the story. This led to them removing the character from the final product entirely.
Was there one thing that went wrong?
Yes. Yes. There was a piece of miscasting that ended up crippling the central storyline that's actually not in the film anymore.
Wow.
Oh. Yeah.
Which means that it's safe to assume that this led to more rewrites and reshoots, and obviously, Guy Ritchie having it re-edited to restructure the story since a vital character was now gone. Speaking of characters, one of them appears to have changed during production. The mage character apparently was supposed to be Guinevere, but according to Hunnam, this change happened due to, quote, partly the film and partly the actor dictating that it was going to be something different, and Guy having the confidence and versatility to just roll with it, and realize that what he intended wasn't going to work, and him recognizing the value of that being something else. So basically it's another casting decision leading to rewrites and changes while filming. I think we're starting to see kind of what happened here. Guy Ritchie had a clear vision. He wanted to do a 3.5 hour long epic retelling of King Arthur, but was forced to cut it down to 2 hours. Then due to issues with the casting decision, was forced to cut the character out completely, which basically led to them cutting out large portions, rewriting, and reshooting scenes, as well as Guy Ritchie in the editing room trying to find ways to condense as much as they could to save on time. I wouldn't be surprised if he was given the same 2-hour mandate that Justice League was given. I mean, they're both Warner Brother movies, released in 2017, so it wouldn't surprise me. Now, unfortunately, that's about all the information that we have on the production, and it comes from the star Charlie Hunnam, and he's still being pretty vague and not diving that much into the issues that occurred. But he said enough that we can kind of sort of understand what happened. It was a mixture of having a 3.5 hour movie cut down to 2 hours, completely removing one character from the final product, while also changing another one while filming, and then of course this led to a bunch of rewrites, reshoots, and heavy editing to try to condense and save time. Sadly, Guy Ritchie never commented on the issues, and it's all just a bunch of small mentions from Charlie Hunnam. But let's move on to the next issue that I think played a big part in the movie's failure, and that's the general audiences at the time. This section will be pretty short and simple. Basically, audiences in 2017 weren't interested in a King Arthur movie. A medieval fantasy movie really wasn't something that people wanted. At least not one based on a character and story that they've seen and heard a dozen times before. Fantasy was definitely popular. I mean, Game of Thrones was the biggest show out at the time, so the interest and market was there. But maybe another retelling and version of the classic King Arthur tale wasn't what audiences wanted. Because this is a story as old as time, and there have been several TV shows and movies adapting this tale for decades. So maybe many people just weren't that interested in it. It's also worth mentioning that superhero movies were at an all-time high, with the MCU building towards Infinity War, and the DCEU just getting started. Not to mention Fox was pumping out the X-Men and Deadpool movies, so the public really shifted their interest to those type of films. So a King Arthur movie just wasn't something that many felt compelled to see. At least that's what I think played a huge factor in the movie's box office pool, failing to even break even. The audience intrigue in this type of movie with this character just wasn't there. I think they'll about cover it for the behind the scenes stuff that I could find, as well as my theory for why general audiences just didn't mesh with the film. So it's time that we take a look at the final product that we did get. I think we all know how the story goes, but I'll be brief with this film's version. Arthur is a man who grew up on the rough streets, who discovers that he is the rightful heir to the throne when he pulls the magical sword Excalibur from stone. Now he must overthrow his evil uncle who is currently running the kingdom and take his rightful place as king. So fairly simple, and we all kind of know how the story goes. It's King Arthur, you know? And I gotta say, the final product is a mostly okay movie. There are definitely a few things that stand out, like the musical score from Daniel Pepperton. It's really solid and ranges from feeling epic to upbeat and fun. And Charlie Hunnam as King Arthur was good, along with several other cast members. Not everyone nails it, and some characters are forgettable, but most do a good job, and thanks to the actor's charisma and the writing, they come across as being very likable. And there's some really good looking shots and scenes, as well as some great looking sets. Some spotty CGI here and there, but not terrible. And of course there's that Guy Ritchie flair he adds with some of the action scenes, and the way he edits and cuts several scenes together, with different events happening simultaneously. Like he's able to have engaging dialogue while showing present and future events at the same time, bouncing back and forth and still making it easy to follow. Basically creating really clever montages. A few times it's done very well here, but others not so much, but we'll get to that later. So even though all that is good, it's very clear when watching, this movie suffers from a lack of development with its antagonist, as well as not diving more into several events, and trying to condense as much as possible, leaving several sections as feeling very rushed, especially in the last 30 minutes when it's trying to wrap it all up before the 2-hour mark. Let's talk about the antagonist first. He's Arthur's uncle, and the evil current king who killed Arthur's father and took his throne. Jude Law does a decent job with what he has, but his character is severely underdeveloped, and his ultimate goal isn't that clear and not really that interesting. His betrayal in the beginning was very sudden. I mean, we don't really get to see his drive or thirst for power before he betrays his brother and takes the throne. And throughout the movie, he just isn't as threatening or imposing as the characters in the movie make him out to be. He's kinda dull, really. And I want to circle back to the creative and fun editing and montages that Guy Ritchie likes to do. He does these in almost every movie to some degree, but here, he's more montage reliant than ever before, with several parts feeling like they were just blown through to save time, like King Arthur's journey to the Darklands. Would have made for a really interesting section, you know, going to this area that has all these giant and magical creatures, but it was over in like 5 minutes. Or them sabotaging and causing issues for the king, and trying to assassinate him. And the movie just jumps from scene to scene and moment to moment pretty quickly, not leaving much time to really dive into the world or characters, and just letting things breathe. I mean, you can really tell this movie was chopped up, because there's just so much unexplored or rushed, which makes it hard to get invested when things are just either skipped over, montaged through, or just mentioned in passing. You could tell there's a larger world here that Guy Ritchie wanted to set up and explore, but sadly, you don't get that here. I can see why most audience found it to be just above average. Yeah, some of the characters are good, and are just likable enough to keep you watching, and at times it's a really good looking movie, with some really awesome moments, especially when you throw in that slick Guy Ritchie style of editing and cinematography. But the story loses steam and gets more interesting before it's rushed to its conclusion, and the main antagonist is just dull. It's entertaining at times, and definitely good looking, but far from the epic King Arthur tale that Guy Ritchie wanted to tell. It's a world that's begging to be explored and expanded upon, but unfortunately they just couldn't do it in this movie. And really, that's all I gotta say about Guy Ritchie's King Arthur movie. It was a recipe for success, but it's unfortunate that it turned out the way it did. I mean, personally, I'm not opposed to the idea of Guy Ritchie and Charlie Hunnam coming back for another King Arthur film. Charlie Hunnam clearly wants to do it, and I think with a longer runtime and less restrictions, it could be done. But considering it was a huge flop and it's been 5 years, it's probably not likely we'll be seeing a continuation of this story. But that's gonna do it for the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it, and leave a comment, let me know. What do you think about Guy Ritchie's King Arthur movie? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Were you underwhelmed? Leave a comment, let me know. And of course, I want to give a nice big shout out to the channel members. I love you guys more than I love myself. If you're interested in becoming a channel member, click the join button down below and check out the perks. If they interest you, consider joining. Or not, it don't matter.
None of this matters. I am a pious man. No temptation can stray me from the path of God.
There is an extra thick gypsy girl outside with no shoes on?